So good evening and welcome to the special Board of Education meeting. Mr. Verlino, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Campbell.
Here.
Mr. Chrysler.
Here.
Mr. Harrison. Ms. Moore.
Here.
Ms. Pickle Antonio.
Here. It looks like we have 6 items for action under human resources. Is there, unless there's an objection to taking those items together, is there a motion to approve items number 1 through 6 under letter A? Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Moore. Is there a second? I'll second. Thank you, Mrs. Chrysler. Any discussion?
Yeah, so I'd just like to talk a second about item 3 and 4.
Louder.
Yeah, sure. Sorry. So it's a very competitive market right now for substitutes in the classroom. The ESC is who we go through to get our substitutes. Folks get licensed through them, BCI check through them. There's a real logjam in BCI right now. And so we have, we're worried about not being able to attract substitute teachers. And so we're increasing the sub pay in number 3 by $10 per day. So it'll be a very competitive rate compared to the rest of the districts in Central Ohio. And then we're also working with GJEA to invite retired teachers from our district to come back and sub for us, and we want to pay those folks $140 a day. And then we are going to hire more long-term subs. So these are folks that come every single day. They report to a particular building and they sub in that building. If they're not needed in a particular building, then they're sent, to another building. And so really, really important that we stay ahead of this, and we're excited about this. And then the long-term sub rate, the same thing. After 11 days, substitutes will make $150. And then traditionally our substitute driver rate for bus drivers tracks with 0 step on in our salary index. And so what this recommendation is about is to move from $18 an hour to $23 an hour. And we have 6 former Gahanna teacher or bus drivers who retired that are come back and are willing to sub, maybe not every day, but I think this rate will attract them and others. So right now, a starting bus driver on step 0 makes $23 an hour. So this tracks with that. And then we moved our training rate from $18 to $20. So these are drivers in training, learning to drive a bus and earn their CDL license. And they're working with our onboard instructors. And so we're going to pay them $20. So I just wanted to point those 2 out. Yeah.
Steve, my only issue is, I agree that you have to do all these things, but shouldn't the word hourly be in number 4 somewhere? These are hourly rates, right?
Yes, they are.
So should we insert the substitute rate of hourly pay for the
Yeah,
following?
we could do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't say that. We should have hourly there.
The way that it is on the teacher substitutes is
Yeah.
right in the rate. Of
Yeah.
Yeah.
just
That's
like
right.
this.
Do you want to amend the agenda to say that?
Yeah, we can do that. If somebody wants to, does somebody want to make a motion to amend item number 4 to reflect that that is an hourly rate of pay?
I would like to make that motion, please.
I'll second that.
Discussion about that? Mr. Verlino, can you call roll?
Ms. Moore.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Ms. Chrysler.
Yes.
Ms. Pickle Antonio.
Yes.
Quick question. Do we know the expected financial impact for these raises on our 5-year forecast?
They would be.
I know it's going to be
Minimal.
nominal, right?
Yeah, it would
But I'm just wondering, have we worked through those numbers and you can share them with us afterwards, or?
not yet on this particular.
Okay, all right. I agree with the competition idea. I just want to see that overall, based on the number of substitute hours and substitute
Yeah.
drivers we've had to use in the past,
Right.
2019 and back, what that kind of impact is going to have on our 554 trips.
Any other questions or comments? I guess I would just like to note that I very much appreciate that there's a distinction now for in the rate of pay for long-term subs versus a one-day sub. I think obviously both kinds of substitutes work really hard in the district. But I do think that it's a definitely a different kind of work when you are taking on, for example, several months of teaching in a classroom versus
Right.
a day. So I think that distinction in the rate of pay makes a lot of sense.
We arrived at these rates by looking at rates in central Ohio and in our near area. And they're very competitive.
Thank you for bringing that up, Earl. Quick question. Do we know they're going to be a long-term sub on day one, or is that something that happens once they hit day 11?
So the first one, long-term subs, we hire to be long-term, show up every day and be in the building. The second one, it's usually for, a medical leave or maternity leave, and they're usually put in, and we wanted to make sure we distinguish the two, but we didn't want one to make less than the other. And so after 11 days, those folks will make 100.
They're serving in a position for 60 days, that's when they go to step 0 in the bargaining unit.
So they would make what a first-year teacher makes.
And do we see that on our agenda when they hit that step 0?
I think that's on, yeah.
Follow up on that.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Just one other comment. I know when we were talking last year, it was with, where was I think? She was saying that there was a bottleneck at the ESC with trying to
Yes.
get
Yeah.
subs processed.
Yeah.
Has that been resolved?
Well, it's more, I think, BCI. So as people are beginning to go back to work, and there is a need for background checks, I think
Okay, I
that,
can deal with that for 1 year.
Yeah.
But this is just another year.
well, what I'm saying is
So what are we doing?
yeah,
How are
so
we communicating with ESC? to
what
get
I'm
it
hearing
resolved?
though is BCI checks are slow in every profession where background checks are needed. There's a real log jam. It's not just the ESC.
Fortunately, I think that's at the Attorney General's office
Yeah.
where those checks are being done.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
I don't
that's the
disagree
only
that we should communicate to them that that's a problem.
Yeah, somehow we've got, I mean, it needs to be addressed. Somebody,
Is that feedback you've gotten this year? Because I haven't heard anything about a backlog this year, but of course I know.
I think it just came.
He just said it.
Well, the BCI,
BCI.
but not the ESC per se, onboarding and things like that.
okay. Well, I guess maybe we need to find out, is the BCI check the only thing that's causing a slowdown in the process?
That's what I've heard, but I can double check to see if there's anything else.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Rubino, can you call the roll, please?
Ms. Antonio,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Chrysler,
Yes.
Mr. Harrison, Ms. Moore,
Yes.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll move.
Thank you, Mrs. Moore. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Mrs. Chrysler. Any discussion? Mr. Rubino, can you call the roll, please?
Ms. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Antonio,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Chrysler.
Yes. It is 6:26 PM and we are adjourned.
Just in time.
All right. Yeah, that's not a problem. Sorry, flag.
I'm already full.
Oh, I
I didn't think we were that good. Prepared.
Oh, I was there. Yeah. I left. Was still sitting there. Oh. I don't make it. And it's very comfortable, but yeah. So.
Yeah.
I may want to come around over here so you can see the screen. We can see it. Yes, thank you. Exercise, Jill. You can sit at the table.
Yeah, there's chairs over here, and over there too.
None of you can see the screen.
I can
I'll
see it.
screen it.
Right.
I just didn't want to be- I should have worn pants.
True. There's no skirt on this one.
There's no skirt.
Ultimately, I think about my day when I get dressed. Like, am I gonna take
A
a
skirt and t-shirt. I love the table.
definitely for you?
Okay, I think we're ready to go if everybody's ready. Alright. Good evening and welcome to the August 25th Student Learning and Achievement / COVID Committee. We're It is 6:31 PM. My name is Jennifer Price. I'm the chair of this committee, and I'm officially calling the committee to order. Just to take roll and acknowledge who's here for the record from the board. We have Matthew Campbell, Daphne Waring, and Roland Antonio. So just to invite our guests, please feel free if you want to, if you change your mind, it's okay. You can want to sit back there, that's fine, but you can sit up at the table. You can, if you need to get closer to see the slides, that's fine. There is a sign-up sheet, and we just ask that everybody just sign in. We'd like to keep just count so that we know that people are attending these meetings, that they're meaningful. We get people ask all the time, how many folks do you have in attendance and things like that. These meetings are intended to be discussion times where we can talk about specific topics related to student learning and achievement, and really dig into items like curriculum and different types of programs of studies and all of the fun stuff that comes along with that. The meetings are usually super fun. We had expanded the committees last year to add facilities to the finance committee, and then also COVID to the SLA committee, because those were kind of relevant things that the district was dealing with. So agenda items could be added month to month if appropriate in each of those committees based on those topics. So if you're interested in, for example, where we are with the facilities master plan and how all the construction work is coming, please check out the finance committee agenda to see if there's something on there, and it's a great opportunity to come and learn about what's going on in the district from a physical space perspective. Please note that the agenda item tonight is professional development for 2021 and 2022. We will be adding a COVID update to the September committee meeting, and so that's something that you should plan for if you want to come to that meeting to talk about anything related to COVID or ask questions. We will be having an update going through our dashboard and talking about various things and changes that have happened within the district since starting that year. Please note that the agendas are usually published on the Friday before the meeting. And the reason that we like to do this early is because number one, we're required to publish the agenda so that the public knows what it is that we're talking about. But that also does become a requirement for us that we are not allowed to speak about things that are not on the agenda. And I like to have a fun meeting, but I also like to make sure that we all understand the ground rules. Certainly, we may not all agree here on different perspectives. Our meeting last month, I thought was just fantastic. I felt like there was a room full of people who had just really dynamic interest, varying opinions, great questions. And I think I can speak for me personally. I know I can speak for me personally and the board when, it's just sometimes listening is a part of that growing process, right? And it takes time to kind of listen to what people are saying and really gain understanding for the things that are important. And so going through these processes and having the opportunity to listen to what people have to say is really important. And then I think also being respectful to one another. I can't thank you enough. I know some of you were here at the last meeting, committee meeting, and it's really nice to be in a community where even if we do disagree or we have questions about things, that we can do it in a respectful way. Not all communities can do that, and I'm just proud to be a part of a community that can walk away and realize that at the end of the day, we're all here for the same reason, which is our kids. The other ground rule is that I am going to ask that we do stick to the agenda items because that was what was published. So any questions about anything unrelated to this agenda, I'll go ahead and start making a list of things that could be added to future topics or to future meetings, and we can kind of move forward from there and see if we can't get those scheduled on a future committee meeting. Yes, ma'am.
How come COVID wasn't added to the agenda?
So at the time that the agenda was done, there was not an update at that time. And so we had only been in school for a week. And so we figured that we wanted to take time to collect data, which is what we said we would do, have a COVID task force meeting, and then come back and be able to report actual data to this group so that we could evaluate that data and really have a meaningful discussion about what that means.
Yeah. I guess I have a follow-up question. Was that done before the decisions were made for this coming school year? Was there a discussion about statistics and things like that where these decisions were made?
So
I know in
think we're
February it was awesome what was shared.
That's fine. I think we're starting to veer, and I'd be more than happy to have a discussion or set up an opportunity for a member of the administration to have a discussion about that. with you. Again, this isn't a topic that's on the agenda.
Yeah,
And so I do want to stick to things that are on the agenda, and in all due respect, I think those questions are important, but I just want to make sure that we're being mindful of the fact that what we published is what we're talking about. And I would be more than happy to answer those questions either after the meeting or another time, or me together with a member of the administration, we can talk about that.
yeah, there's another forum. That's great. I was under the impression it was this. So that's,
As long as there's an item on the agenda that we can talk about anything that's on the agenda, because that's what has been published to the greater public. And that's what they have been prepared for and notified that they can come and talk about. So what we don't want to do is talk about what we're not allowed to do,
right.
is talk about things that aren't published, because then the general public doesn't have an opportunity to weigh in, and that's not necessarily appropriate. Yes, sir.
So for your guys' calendar, you guys have a 6:30 to 8. GJPS Board of Education COVID/Student Learning and Achievement Committee. That's what your calendar says right now.
Right, and we publish an agenda for that meeting. So that agenda was published on Friday.
Sure, so why would we have COVID in it if you guys aren't even gonna speak about it in the agenda?
That's actually the name of the committee, sir.
The name of the committee about stuff they don't talk about.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
it says
and you know
student
what?
learning and achievement and all of a sudden it's professional development.
Sir, that's the agenda item. So if you want a copy of the hard agenda, you can see that the title of the committee is always at the top. And then inside the body of the agenda is the actual agenda items that we're talking about. And that's,
The blank page,
there's an item there.
it's one item.
So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna start the actual agenda item itself. If anybody would like to speak on that, I appreciate it. And we welcome certainly all comments and feedback about the agenda item we have today. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mrs. Elliott and we'll go ahead and start the meeting.
Thank you. So good evening and thank you all for joining us. We're going to talk a little bit today about professional development for the 21-22 school year. This evening, we're going to go over some highlights of what we've already been supporting staff with, as well as sessions and opportunities that the curriculum team and the administrators are going to support teachers with throughout the school year. We all know that the last 18 months has been very challenging, and it's important to acknowledge that in this context as well, because it certainly has brought a lot of uncharted territory for the curriculum team as we work to support teachers in supporting students digitally or in person. I want to start by thanking what I believe to be the best curriculum team in the state. Their expertise, their professionalism, their willingness to roll up their sleeves and get things done to support our teachers and our kids is just exceptional. And so we are joined by a strong portion. We have a few people that aren't with us, but I do want to thank Tia and Jason and Sharon and Aaron and Debbie and Sue, as well as Missy and Cliff and Corinne that aren't able to be with us tonight to support the incredible work that they've done to support our teachers and help our district be what it is. So to get us started, this first slide here just reminds everyone that we do have a professional development advisory committee that consists of 5 administrators and 14 teachers. We work with this committee to select our professional development theme and to plan our structures for PD and how our professional days that are worked into the calendar are shaped. This year we have some new committee members, so we are excited to welcome them to the team. We haven't had our first official meeting of this school year yet, but that is coming soon. And we do have committee representatives from every building, as well as 2 from the high school, and Joan Miller, who is a global district representative. And we also have worked hard to try and capture multiple staff members from various positions so that we make sure we have the perspectives and needs of all staff considered. So I'm going to start just highlighting a PD topic that we actually started the school year with this year. This topic, OTES 2.0, I think we'll probably say it a million times over the course of the school year. But we worked with teachers on the first couple days of the year to go over the new requirements of the updates to the Ohio Teacher Evaluation System. And so, we've been dealing with a lot in teaching and learning, but we also now have this additional mandate in place. So we wanted to make sure our teachers had a strong foundation from the beginning of the year so they understood what their evaluation system looks like and the changes to it. We've been doing OTES 1.0 for about 10 years now. And after some new legislation and the State Department of Education piloting OTES 2.0 with about 76 districts in the state, we got this new framework. And so this year was our year to implement. We could have implemented last year, but decided through collaboration with GJEA to push that off until this year, which is the final year for districts to work on that implementation. So there are many similarities between OTES 1.0 and 2.0, but there are also some differences that are going to take us some time to get used to and work through specifics on. The evaluation cycles are still pretty similar as far as including professional growth plans, pre and post observations, a teacher performance rubric that has changed some, and the process of formal and informal observations. But there are also some pretty significant differences that we spent the majority of our time working with teachers on the first couple days. So some of the differences are highlighted on the screen. The professional growth plans are now connected to the prior year's evaluation. So they work to identify some very specific growth areas to help improve their teaching practices in the classroom. And so that's definitely a positive change and makes sense. Before, it did not directly have to be connected to their individual evaluations, and so that's a shift. The second bullet there is about the data and how it's used. So previously, teachers had student growth measures, and they were working to have students meet a particular cut score, a particular target. And now the shift has includes an expectation that teachers are talking about how they're using data. So how are they collecting data and how are they using it to make real-time instructional changes and decisions based on the students' needs in their classrooms? So we also see that as a positive because that's what our teachers are doing every day. And so that's actually some of the feedback the curriculum team received in some of their support sessions, that, wow, this really makes sense. This is what I'm doing already, and I can work with my evaluator to talk about what I need to know about my kids, what I do know about my kids, and then what I'm going to move forward. There was also a shift in some of the rubric components. It was condensed, and so we spent some time looking at what does it mean to be a skilled teacher? What does it mean to be an accomplished teacher? What does it mean to be developing? And then finally, also just talking in general about some of the structure changes. So for instance, there's still 2 observations in the full evaluation cycle, but one of them is considered holistic, where kind of the whole rubric is reviewed. And then the second one is focused, where you take a focus from that original holistic observation, and then you're kind of drilling in the spirit of growth, like really honing in and targeting some improvement areas. So that is just an overview of kind of what we kicked the year off with. I'm going to pass it over to Tia now, and she's going to share about another beginning of year topic that we address with teachers and then kind of outline the plan for the year.
There we go. So another professional learning opportunity that we had for staff at the beginning of the year was on our new universal screener, MAP. And we had the staff who will be implementing that. They learned a little bit more about the benefits of a universal screener, as well as learned about MAP itself. Took a look at the platform, took a look at the setup for it. They were able to, review some videos and be able to play around in the platform, setting up test sessions. But it was just that initial informational meeting around MAP and how it connects also to HQSD for some teachers, because of the information that it can produce for students and how teachers would be able to use it. So that was the initial learning that we did for staff with math. And as a reminder, again, that focuses on reading and math for the universal screener. We will have later in this fall another training session to dive deeper into the reports, what those reports look like, how to pull those reports, how to read and understand those reports, and how to use the information within the reports to be able to make decisions about instructional needs and moves for students.
Is that October 11th?
The,
When you're gonna
Oh.
do the deeper dive?
no, that'll actually happen in September.
Okay, good.
Can I ask a question about that? Like, what's the feedback loop for teachers with the use of the screener? Is there something built in that can kind of to identify like if there's challenges with it or additional trainings needed or where there might be, opportunities for improvement? Is that feedback loop automatically built into the training program?
Yeah, so we have, for all of our trainings, we do push out a professional development feedback form that was actually revised with, in collaboration with PDAC. And so we share that with the staff and then take that information, process it, and talk about what adjustments need to be made for upcoming trainings and then also future trainings in the next year. And so we do have that process already in place for all of the PD that we present currently.
Oh, nice.
And there's an ongoing structure between instructional coaches
Yeah.
and administrators and, working in collaboration with
Yes.
curriculum.
So there's an opportunity for them to provide it directly to the facilitator or the staff that Joe had mentioned. And then there's the opportunity to submit the survey also, which is more anonymous, but that they can get their information in there. And we take a look at that. We look at it as PDAC, and we look at it as a curriculum team to talk about how can we continue to improve and make sure that the PD that we're offering and all of the learning opportunities that we're offering are relevant and applicable for staff.
Is MAP new for a segment of the teachers, or has it been used in different modes over the past couple of years?
We have used it on a very small scale with some teachers. And we first were introduced to it when we looked at it as a diagnostic tool for math only. Because we did have assessments in place and we could pull more reading data on our students, but we were finding that we had a struggle pulling good data around what students' abilities were in math. So we did pull it in through the MTSS process. I want to say that was maybe 2.5 years ago. The pandemic year gets me thrown on my timeline, but I do believe it was about 2.5 years ago is when we pulled it in from the MTSS RTI as a diagnostic tool. So we did have some teachers use screening kids to get math information, and then it was being processed at the building level on what math supports could be provided to that student based on what we were seeing.
Thanks.
And if I could add, Tia ran a fantastic process, selection process, where multiple administrators and teachers were involved, and they kind of took a look at several different universal screener options, and the information you can get from them, and the instructional supports that are allowed, or that are available, and then ultimately landed on, this particular tool.
So that happened at the beginning, and then we'll move into just again looking at the scope of what our professional development opportunities are going to look like within this year. So as Joe had mentioned earlier, we haven't had our initial meeting with PDAC yet, but we are very fortunate with that collaboration to be able to pull that full group together to really be able to process the feedback, and it is a collaborative effort to be able to build quality PD for teachers throughout the year. So what you're seeing, one of the things that is pretty set for us though is the structure of the way that our PD works. And so it's a blend of the district days that we have that are built into our calendar. We have content specific release days that you are going to hear more about from the curriculum team. And then we also have several opportunities each year for our staff to engage in learning where they could get graduate credit if they would like. And we do have a number of staff that engage in that. And that's done in the sense of different courses that we can offer that are facilitated by either building leadership, the instructional coaching team, or the curriculum team. We've also given credit for our book studies, and that's through a partnership that we have with BOE, which has been very beneficial in the past. And that we usually get a ton of teachers that engage in those opportunities because they're growing, it's very relevant, it's practical, we're facilitating it, but then they also get that credit that helps for licensure renewal and those kinds of things. And so the list of topics and the themes that are there are still just kind of very broad topics that have been a part of the conversation over the last several years. And we did have an opportunity to do a survey of staff in the spring before we left to just kind of get an idea of where their interests were lying. But again, we'll be able to finalize and flesh it out more once we meet with PDAC and to really be able to establish what those themes and topics will be for this year.
Are the results from the OTES teacher evaluations accumulated, combined, and does that help? Is that even used as a tool to provide what kind of PD should be provided to teachers? If we have an ongoing trend, that sort of thing, can we use, or are we using OTES results? For instance, a couple of years ago, we had some algebra 2 issues. I would think that we might want some professional development for that in order to resolve that big bump where we're having some significant issues over a couple of school years.
Yeah,
Is that used?
yeah, that definitely makes sense. And yes, it is used in different ways. A lot of the times from the evaluation perspective, it starts at the building level. And that's where we look at building-based topics and PD opportunities, as well as the embedded PD that we have through PLCs and our coaching team. But also collectively, and when we meet as a full administrative team, so that's the curriculum team and our building leadership, we do start to talk about what are some of those trends. And then that's really where we come in and talk about what instructional supports can we support buildings, but also put in place and embed in maybe some of the content specific release days that we're having with teachers, so we can be very intentional about supporting those needs.
Do you get any pushback from PDAC when making suggestions on that?
No, because I think, we are, all of us are coming in with wanting to continue to grow and learn as educators and to make sure that we're providing the best supports for our students. And so it really is just how do we marry the two in the pedagogy, the instructional practices with maybe a topic that might not on first glance appear to be connected to instruction, but in all of it, it does. It's like, we might have a topic that helps us to better understand our students holistically, that then helps us to better engage with them from an instructional standpoint, if that makes sense. So we do have deep, good conversation, and we're for the last 2 or 3 years, again, I need to stop trying to do the timeline. But since we've reinstated PDAC and been meeting with them, we have been able to come up with solid PD plans that I think collectively, and also based on the feedback that we have gotten over the years from staff, has been very beneficial. And the staff feel like it's very relevant to what they feel. And the same from the administrators too, like they feel like it is moving in the right directions.
Okay.
And I will add that OTES does not necessarily afford us information at the granular level about particular contents. So for instance, we're not able to look at OTES and see that there might be some gaps in our algebra instruction per se, because teachers essentially get to kind of select when administrators come in and observe them. And we've got an evaluation process that not only follows ORC, but then our bargaining contract has some language that specifies those requirements as well. So I feel confident saying this doesn't happen, but in theory, we could not observe an algebra lesson all year through OTES. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But we would still be able to pull pedagogical and instructional components in general and apply it into all contents.
What is the current arrangement for observation? How is that set up with the building principals at this point under the current contract?
Yeah, so it's based off of a prior year's evaluation. So there are 4 categories. There's ineffective, developing, skilled, and accomplished. If you end your evaluation skilled, then per the contract and allowable ORC, you go on to a cycle where you get a full evaluation every 2 years. If you're accomplished, you go into the cycle of every 3 years. And so based on where teachers fall, and then of course all new staff members to us go into the full cycle. We have staff that are either full cycle or off cycle. And so depending on where you are, that determines if you're going to have 1 observation or 2 and kind of all the components. And from there, administrators work with their teachers to kind of schedule, when do you want me to come in? Okay, we work out our pre-conference, we work out our post-conference. It's kind of an individual scheduling process that happens with each staff member and each administrator, the number of times they need to do it each year.
Is that dependent on what the teacher wants, or is that dependent on what the administrator wants?
So as far as what they're observing,
veto what the administrator wants, when the administrator wants to visit?
usually the administrator will kind of give windows, like I'm available from this time to this time and this week, and then teachers kind of sign up and fill in the blanks for those spots. But as far as what they're observing, what the evaluator is observing, the teachers get to determine what lesson that is.
And so just again, wanted to point back some of the themes and the topics that, have been reoccurring for us. As if you can remember in the 1920 school year, we read We Got This, Equity, Access, and the Quest to Be Who Our Students Need Us to Be by Cornelius Minor. And that was the first time in a long time, I think, that we had a district-wide book study, had a ton of participation, which was wonderful at all of the 3 levels. Had an opportunity to do a second round of it last year to dive deeper in, because what Cornelius does very well is provide practical strategies of engaging students in the classroom. So it's connected to that instruction. We'll talk about the pedagogy. And so, in the first round, we were taking the information in and we had a lot of conversations, but the second round was meant for and open to anyone who wanted to do it, whether they read it before or not, to be able to dive deeper into some of the resources and the strategies that he provides in that text. And again, we had really good turnout, and now we had over 80 people district-wide that signed up for the second round of it, which was really, really fun. And even though we did it through Google Meet, it still was very engaging. I might, say that as pat myself back. But anyway, just kidding.
She did a great job. She did a great job.
But I give a little bit of that context because we are excited to have the opportunity to continue our learning from Cornelius Minor. We are still working through the details because, of course, just with the nature of the pandemic, there are some shifts that are being made. He is based out of New York. And so there are some shifts. So we're still working through finalizing those details, but we are excited about the opportunity to continue our learning directly from him. And so that is one thing that's on there. Some other things that have come up again from staff have been learning around restorative practices, conscious discipline, which again, that was about 2 years ago where we implemented that at the elementary level. And so being able to reconnect to that. And then just universal design for learning and just generally understanding and better supporting our students and our families so that we can provide the appropriate proper instruction that they deserve. And so again, once we are able to meet with PDAC and we start getting those meetings up and running, we will be able to finalize and then have our topics and our days mapped out once we connect with them. Okay.
I have 2 quick questions. Can you spell, are you saying PDAC?
Yes.
PDAK?
C.
C?
Yes.
Okay, and then my next question is, the author of this book is a CRT activist, and you guys are saying you're not teaching CRT, so why are we choosing this? Why aren't we going with somebody who's not a CRT activist, I guess?
So I will speak to that initially and say, in full disclosure, I don't know him to be a CRT activist. What we do know is he's connected closely to the Teachers College, which guides a lot of our reading and writing workshop, structures. And so that's how we initially were introduced and connected, was through the Teachers College.
And I would echo that. I don't know him to be a CRT activist either. What I do know that he does, though, is he talks about what are the structures and supports that could be put in place to ensure that every student in the classroom is receiving high quality education. And so he gives a lot of instructional moves and this is, how to be able to engage with students so that they can access the reading, writing, the math, the science, and social studies that we want them to engage with. So it really is more about the teaching practices and the structures that you set up in your class, and also honoring every student that is in that course.
We clarify too, PDAC is an acronym. So if you look up that word,
Wanted to be able to Google it, so I wanted to know.
I don't know that you'll find anything
it's
by
a good
Googling
one.
PDAC.
Yeah, so it
Yeah.
stands for
That's-
Professional Development Advisory Committee.
Got
Yes,
it.
that, I just wanted to make sure that, yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just wondering, because it seems like a lot of stock is being put into Cornelius Minor. I think, we kind of deserve to know more about him and what his views are. So I think it's worth looking into. If she's questioning his background, his activism, if he is
I can tell you to speak
radical
to
in his
that. after.
personal life.
Yeah, I
or-
can tell you that.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying it's something to look into, but I was actually wondering how someone like that would be chosen.
Okay, I can
Do
speak to that.
parents, teachers have input and why is it just one? Why aren't there
Okay.
multiple?
So for years in our district, we've been practicing reading and writing workshop, which is a strategy where students have voice and choice in what they read and what they write. We've been to New York. We've worked with Teachers College and Lucy Calkins. The Institute is where, you know, in the summers, over 5,000 people attend it. Cornelius himself is from Liberia, and he talks about his experience as an immigrant in New York. He does practice radical empathy in the classroom. He asks when he teaches, he talks about with his students about the map of where he's going, what he's going to do. And we have been in classrooms in New York City and elsewhere observing teachers teach kids. There's nothing in his book, We Got This, about CRT, not a single thing. And so you can, you know, he is a staff developer at one of the best teacher colleges in the country, if not the best, the Columbia Teachers College. So I don't know what else you would like to know about him, but I think one of the things that you might want to do is check out his book, because it's an excellent read and it'll give you a flavor of what he's about. Once in a while, I'll get calls from people and they'll say, are you teaching Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States? And I'll ask the person, have you read that book? And invariably, what I'll get told is no, I just don't want it taught in our schools. So I think one of the things we have to do is, if we're going to critique an author, we should actually read that author. And we should actually know what they're about. Now, maybe outside of his role at Teachers College, he's talked about CRT, but I can tell you, we do not teach CRT in our schools. And it's an impractical thing to teach to a 4th grader or even a 12th grader. Absolutely impossible. When CRT is taught, it's usually at the graduate level, and it's usually in a law school. And so I just want to clear that up. We're not teaching, our equity plan is not about CRT, not even remotely.
And I would just say, in regards to, you know, you mentioned kind of putting a lot of stock in Cornelius Minor. So because of the connection to Teachers College, you know, that was our introduction. And certainly the strategies that get implemented in the classroom to meet students' needs are important to us. But we also like to not kind of do a one and done model. So we found the book, we read the book, and now we're excited to hear more from him. But the same thing applies to other types of, you know, professional development. So we heard from Kelly Capicosto last year. We're also doing a book study from her, and she's out of the Ohio State University. So, you know, it's kind of an ongoing study, essentially, of some of the different, you know, teaching strategies that we're using in classrooms.
I think there's a question.
Yeah, I just wondered, I mean, your definition of equity that you're going by, does that make sense? When you say equity, what do you mean? And I mean, I was looking on the website and I saw the EEQ, you know, I saw that and read it, but that doesn't mean anything, to be honest.
Essentially, what we are committed to is ensuring that every student that is in our buildings, in our classrooms, in our schools is getting the high quality education that they deserve. And so taking a look at, and like I had said a little bit earlier, a part of that is making sure that we understand who those students are, what their needs are, and so that we can best meet them where they are to be able to get them where we're needed.
So equal opportunity, not equal result. Does that make sense? There's a difference.
Well, ultimately, our result is that everybody's successful.
Yeah, but everybody's not going to be successful because it's a lot of what you put yourself into it as well. But you're saying equal opportunity for everybody.
In order to get success out of that student, yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, and so what we will do now is move into some more information around it, specifically around those content-specific release days.
I do have something based on the Cornelius Minor. We just looked up, he has a Twitter post on May 31st, 2020. And he says, everything that I do, parenting, teaching, writing, is about dismantling white supremacy. I post stuff here sometimes, but know that Twitter ain't activism. Activism is what you do in your communities. And he's got a Y hashtag Black Lives Matters in your classrooms too. So she has a valid point, and I believe, I don't know if you guys are making the same point back there or what, but he is an activist. I mean, it's blatant right there in his Twitter post.
first Google search that comes up when you query his name.
So are you equating critical race theory with activism?
It's minor.
I mean,
But
all you do is
about
Google it.
dismantling the white supremacy.
There was a question that was asked about
Yeah.
critical race theory specifically. And that was the question that I think was answered.
But I think they're questioning what his development and things you guys are talking about and incorporating into the school system. Correct?
So let me just point out, his book, We Got This, doesn't have anything about CRT, doesn't have anything about, activism in terms of dismantling white supremacy. What it's about is teaching strategies to build equity and access and to connect with kids and build a sense of belonging. So what he does on Twitter did not come into the book that we read and the book study that we did. And so if you're suggesting that we should reject everything that somebody does because of
We're
a
just saying
post on
read it.
It should
Twitter.
be questioned though.
Okay,
Is-
sure,
Is
sure.
knowing that this is out there, so when this does come up at a board meeting,
Yeah,
you're not just giving us a verbal
that's
script.
right, right.
When this is the first thing that shows up.
I
on Twitter,
agree.
is what we're
And
saying.
you are questioning it and we're having a deliberative dialogue about it. But I can tell you, that didn't come up in the
It may
work
not,
we
but
did.
that's what he is about, is all the point that we're making.
Well,
If Adolf Hitler had a book about education, would you be going off of what his book said, even though he doesn't mention being a Nazi? Probably not.
yeah, I'm not
that's
sure
what we're
that's a valid comparison, but
Why not?
It is though, I mean,
so I think the post about white supremacy that he made is not even remotely connected to what Hitler did. Not even
I'm
remotely.
not saying that it's equal.
sure, but do you guys
I'm just
document the comments
saying.
made as a secretary of the group? Does someone document the comments made by the parents?
It's being
We
recorded.
want, okay.
This is
This
being
is a
recorded.
This is
meeting.
because we don't want to come back later and find out, well, oh man, well, we didn't know that.
So this is a public meeting that's
Sure.
being live streamed and is on the YouTube account. So
Okay.
Yeah.
to answer your question about whether it's being documented, you can go pull up the live stream or the recorded stream of this meeting.
Would be a quick example, maybe a challenge of equity that this would end. Just a quick example. I mean, if this is something that's that valuable, can you just give us a quick example of what it is? You told us what it isn't. Because I always thought our classrooms were equitable. What is the classroom challenge that we need to do some sort of equity training? And what, just give me an example, one example.
Yeah, I think, I definitely think that that's a good question. I think, again, it goes back to helping staff and building leadership better understand the students that we're serving. When sometimes, when we take a look at some of the academic achievement in comparison, we are noticing that there are different groups of students that are performing at different levels. And so taking a look at how do we address that, just like with the earlier conversation when we talked about looking at data, how are you using the data to help you to better understand your students and then to make informed decisions about the instructional moves that you're going to make. This is another way to help us to understand, because it's not just connected to what we see on a paper pencil test, but also what are the moves that are happening in the class? What do we need to know about how the student learns? What do we need to know about what the student is bringing to the table based on their own lived experiences? How do my lived experiences play into what's happening into the classroom? So that's what the equity learning helps us to, from a staff perspective, it helps us to have a better awareness so that we can better support the kids that we have in the classroom.
I'll tell you one
What are one of
example
the
of last year, or maybe it was 2 years ago because of COVID. One of the PD sessions was having the teachers take on the role of, when we did the simulation.
Poverty
the-
simulation.
The poverty simulation. So a student that comes to school that hasn't eaten, and his mom may not have come home last night, and they have some sort of catastrophe, be it a suicide or a drug bust in their home, how do we expect that child to learn, to come in and sit down and learn? And what Cornelia says is you have to understand what that child his psyche is, basically. We all, as a board members, got this book, right? I would encourage you to read it, because it's helping you understand that everybody's not coming from a two-parent, secure, middle-class home. That's the gist of what our teaching colleges, that's the mindset that teachers come out with, and that's not what you get when you walk in a classroom. So if you have a student who is, who is of a different culture, Indian or whatever, and they have their indication, the respect and understanding of that student and finding some, to Steve's point, making available some books that they can read and write a book report on that they can relate to in their culture. That's how you can reach that child, not having him read about a totally different culture. He or she's going to relate better to a culture that they know. And there's books out there. It's just you've got to access them because we don't have a homogeneous classroom. It's just not America.
By the fact that you've got them all in there. I don't see that you're not making me feel any better if you're isolating them by culture.
Well, that's your perspective, but they are welcoming the idea to have.
And it's not isolation. So one of the examples that he gives that I think it's a very simplistic example that he gives about an experience that he had because he's also a middle school English teacher. And so he talks about when he had a student who was left-handed. And one of the requirements that he had in his class was that you had a spiral bound notebook for your composition because there's a lot of writing within our units of study. And so that was one of the expectations that he had. And it wasn't until midway through the first quarter that the student spoke up and said, I know this is a requirement, I know this is what you want, but this is uncomfortable to me because I'm left-handed and to be able to write in it, this notebook doesn't work for me. And so then it dawned on him, he's like, I didn't realize that there was an expectation or a structure that I put in place that was actually hindering success for my kid. So then he changed and he's like, now you have different options for the different notebooks that you can use because really what we want kids to do is to write in their notebook. We don't have to be sticklers on what that notebook looks like in order for them to engage. And so it's as simple as that is having a better understanding of the needs of the kids and making adjustments in the class so that they can access the learning that we want available. That's a very simple example that he explains. A lot of his strategies that are built in his book are strategies like that of how do we better understand our kids, not isolate them, but how do we better understand their background and what they're bringing in so that we can provide and meet their needs with the instruction and the expectations and the supports that we put in place. And I think it also connects to, we have talked about at meetings in the past about our student sense of belonging, every student. So again, not isolating, not a single student, but every student, we want them to feel like they have a solid foundation and a strong place in the classroom because when you feel like you belong there and when you feel like the teachers expect you to be successful in there, you're going to step up to the plate. But there are students that don't feel that way and we have to figure out why. And then how do we then help to increase their sense of belonging so that they can access the learning that we want to provide them? Those are the types of strategies that it helps with.
So is that based on data in our own school district?
I'm
Yes.
sorry. She has her hand up in the back first, excuse me.
I have a question about community. I'm 60 years old.
I can't hear you real well, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But I don't understand why we have equity, whatever. Why is this just not common sense in a classroom that if a student needs something adjusted, that it's just common sense? We don't have to have it labeled as equity, equality, because whether you guys believe it or not, there's a lot of other things that means that's going on all over. But that's why we have a concern with it. I'm a grown-up parent. I'm here because I have future students that may not come to this district after one understand. This is ridiculous. What you're saying should be an educated person should be able to be in tune with their students. If a parent comes up to you and says, hey, my child I'm a left-hander, by the way, so I understand the challenges of being left-handed. So I can honestly say, I did not feel inferior or put out because I was left-handed. I mean, that's just the example that you used.
Yeah.
But I am sick of hearing this, that we're gonna do this, and especially this, that should be common sense. You should be doing that already. There should not be a label put on it. There's no need for that. Because it makes a lot of us feel like there's another agenda at play that you're actually trying to push, but you're not being honest about. It's not necessary. Like I said, I don't mean to be disrespectful to you all, but I've lived a long time and I know what I'm talking about. I've raised my own children, learning disabilities, they both graduated from college. And I'll tell you, I was the advocate for my child. I know a lot of these people sitting in this room are advocates for their children. We don't need to have a special program or have a question about who you're choosing to mentor this program through, because we all have valid concerns about that. Where's this headed? I think you want answers. We want you guys to be transparent, which I don't feel like you're being. You're giving us like you're reading off of a paper, or telling us, oh no, they don't believe in that. Yeah, they do. Everybody Google people. I don't care what they have on Twitter or whatever. This is how they think. This is who you're using. This is who you're mentoring something from. We need to be listening to people who are paying the taxes here.
Thank you, appreciate that. Ma'am, I think you're gonna next.
I was just wondering, so this, so this framework, was it used to help formulate the decisions that were made regarding COVID this year? And was it used to make changes in the classroom? Because I see struggles that come about from, so I'm just wondering if there were changes to help use this framework in the classroom.
So just to make
Sorry,
sure
I don't know
I'm clear,
if
the
that's
question
worded
is the equity plan or the equity framework connected to COVID decisions that have been made? Is that the
Yeah,
question?
because it's referring specifically to inclusive, I mean, all the words you've used, I felt like,
Sure.
depending on how you determine equity, because
Yeah.
it's that sense of belonging. I mean, there's a lot to this plan unless I'm understanding it.
Yeah, no, I mean, the answer is no. It has
Okay.
not influenced COVID decisions.
Okay.
That's been based on guidance and data and recommendations from the task force.
So this work, this equity work has been going on since 2019. And it primarily is about building a stronger sense of belonging. We know that well-being, the mind, is connected. How well you feel about yourself, about your environment, how connected you feel, the relationships you build, helps you learn better. Learning well and well-being go together. And it's really, really important. And I think, sir, you asked, is this connected to local data? I think that was a question you had. And it is. We do every year a survey called Panorama, where we look at the social and emotional well-being of our students. And that data informs us of student-adult relationships, student-to-student relationships. And it's important to know that our data has improved a little bit, but when we first did this, at our high school, we had something like 60% of our kids did not feel a strong connection, not a strong sense of belonging. And so it's really, really important that we increase that sense of belonging. And to do that, we need to do it for all kids. So no kids should feel ostracized or left out as a result of this work. And it's extremely important when you look at the context of mental health in kids. From 2008, or wait a second, 2007 to 2018, the suicide rate at the national level is up 60% from 11 to 24-year-olds in that group. In Ohio, it's up 47% in that same time frame. If you want to search that data out, or if you want me to send it to you, I can. It's really, really important. Kids are more fragile. There's more angst, there's more anxiety than there's ever been, than I've ever seen in my 33-year career. And I think it's extremely important that if you want to take, an advanced class, Like, I can tell you about a student who wanted to challenge himself in AP US history, sometimes it's called A-Push. The counselor said to him, "You'll never make it in this class. You really don't like to read." And the student said, "Well, what do I need to do to succeed in this class?" "You need to read. You need to write. You need to do harder work than you've ever done in your life." And so that student went and got his grandmother. And his grandmother advocated for him. And he was able to take that class. They took a chance. And then later he took other classes like that. He didn't grow up in a home with two parents. He didn't grow up in a place where people talked about AP classes. So what that school did was that school knocked down the barriers for that student so that student could succeed. And that student was me. That was 1976. And I never would have had the opportunity to do that if that counselor hadn't taken the time to help me. I needed barriers knocked down. That's what equity is. It's looking at someone and saying, breathing potential in them. Sometimes it's believing in them before they believe in themselves. That's what great teaching does. And so this is extremely important work. And if we don't do it well, kids are at risk. And so when I look at what Cornelius Minor does and the things that he talks about in his book and the strategies he uses are not connected to what you just Googled. I didn't know that. I didn't Google him. But to reject his work.
No one's rejecting the work. We're just saying know who you choose before
Yeah,
you choose.
right.
That's all.
And I'm glad we're having this deliberative dialogue where we're
Not rejecting
talking in a very respectful way about what this work is. This work is extremely important. Yeah.
Okay, you had me at mental health. Because what I wrote down and what bugged me just now that I had to get out of my system is that you care about mental health with regards to this program, but my son's mental health with regards to his equity in COVID and mask wearing doesn't matter, is what it seems. So I just needed to get that out.
Okay.
Thank you.
We're gonna stick to the agenda because
Well, it is, it's about equity, and he brought up mental health, so I'm sticking to what he said about mental health.
And as long as we're not construed by the equity side of things, if it's heavily focused on a specific race, religion, whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's the problem with, and a lot of concern people have is, doesn't matter which one, I mean, is this gonna be a widespread equity look, or is it gonna be focused on certain groups of people and things like that? Because then it's gonna ostracize them or focus on them and ostracize another group. And it's gonna be an ugly cycle after that, because it'll just keep cycling and cycling and cycling. And you'll keep saying, well, now we got this group over here, we got to feel like it's equitable, and now this group over here doesn't feel like it anymore, because I don't doubt the suicide rates too, but I think a lot of that has to do with social media as well. These kids are so influenced by social media anymore. I mean, I watch the younger kids, even just imitate things from YouTube and them. And I would say social media is a bigger impact, so then I definitely don't take away anything you said about where the suicide rates and stuff are, but I don't think it's all school. I don't think it's 100% making sure that it's the school's responsibility to make sure all these rates go down.
Right.
It's the school's responsibility to teach our kids.
Right.
And hopefully the community can help these kids too, along with the social media side of things. Social media a lot of times is very, very terrible for the young kids because it teaches them the wrong things. And a lot of that's going on right now.
I agree with you.
I think the point, though, is that sometimes it can be difficult for students to learn when some of these other factors are going on. So, I mean, it's great to say that it's not the school's responsibility to address the suicide rates. It would be wonderful if all of the resources were available in the community so that it wasn't.
No, I'm not saying the school doesn't address it. I'm saying it shouldn't be a certain focuses of things to say, well, this will help lower that.
Right.
It's the teacher and the guidance counselor's responsibility themselves to focus on that. And when they see that happening with the child, take care of it, not ignore it.
Right.
And that should be 100% all the time,
Right.
not bringing in some program to try to drive that.
Yeah, I agree.
I have a question on, why do you have to have a program that you're calling it equity? When, like what you were talking about, the scenario that you gave. Okay, if my kid went to a counselor and said, I want to take this on. First of all, I'd have an issue with the counselor telling them, oh, no, you can't do that. Me, that would be, mom would be in the office going to. Now, you turned it to where the counselor then said, well, in order to do that, this is what you need. But that's what my point is this should be common sense. As educators, you should be paying attention. Not you, I mean, I'm not saying you guys are the ones that are teaching, but you should be paying attention to your students and what their needs are. You know, one student is not going to need the same attention that another student needs. They all learn differently. That's forever.
And so
Educators don't teach like that, but you know, whether Joey needs to have this or so-and-so, that's where I'm having an issue with an equity program or whatever. We're not all the same. We don't all learn the same way. Like I said, I've raised 2 children with learning disabilities, so I know what I'm talking about. Advocates for them, and I think I don't push money this program as possible in our district. I'd like to know that if it's.
So can I just address that? Because what you just said right before that question is exactly what we're doing. It's like not every kid is the same and not every kid learns in the same way. And that's what we're doing. It isn't a program. And so I think that, and then we will get into the rest of the PD that we want to talk about. But again, it goes back to what you said from the beginning is that we are helping and we're helping to teach and help teachers to see how to better understand their students so that they can meet their needs. All of the students, whatever those needs may be, because not every student learns the same and has the same needs. And in most cases, and for our teachers, they're phenomenal in being able to understand their students. But there's always more to learn. Like we are a learning organization, so we are always learning more about our students so that we can better support them. And that's all that this is talking about, is how do we better understand our kids to better support them.
Is this just considered further education for your teachers?
Correct.
That's professional development.
That's the
Yes,
professional
it's
development.
professional development.
Excuse me, but like I said, it's been a long time since I've been in school. Your terminology really doesn't mean a whole lot. That's my asking question. But I guess I'm having an issue hearing a lot about the equity and all this stuff. We've heard a lot of different things as kids coming home from school, saying certain things or, you know, being told certain things or how to believe or whatever. And it's like, that's where I have a problem. What you're saying again, I still don't get why it has to be called out and be called a certain thing. What you're trying to teach your teachers should be, probably already been taught that. But
And it has been, I think, just though as populations grow and develop and change, there's always more to learn. But again, the equitable piece goes back to meeting the kids where they are. And so making sure that we understand how to do that. And so I would like to give the rest of my curriculum team an opportunity to go through what are some of those ways that we're helping to continue to feed into our teachers so that they can better meet your students' needs. Okay. I'm going to turn it over to Sue, which is going to talk a little bit about our preschool opportunities.
So our preschool teachers and our teacher assistants and related service staff also have very specialized training available to them, as well as our district training available to them through the curricular team or through the district leadership teams. This year, our decisions about professional development were really focused based on teacher feedback, our student data, and some shifts that are happening in the Ohio Department of Education licensing roles over the summer. Right now, we have 3 staff members already trained in what is our early childhood literacy program. It's a letters program, which directly bridges to our K-12 literacy initiative. Our preschool teachers are right now going through an intensive, 3 of them, intensive training to better understand the early learning standards, the early childhood development milestones, and how to meet different learners that come to us Some knowing their letters and sounds, some not knowing what a letter is compared to a piece of writing on a piece of paper or a picture. So we're trying to find ways to support all learners at a very young age to get them ready for kindergarten. And so that's one initiative we have at our preschool program. Another is just continuing to implement our multi-tiered systems of support. The last number of years, we really focused on tier 1, and now we are going to provide very intentional job embedded coaching from our intervention specialist coach, focused on literacy, math, and social emotional interventions. So we're doing job embedded coaching alongside the teacher, as well as short and long-term objectives to focus on, again, understanding our youngest learners and how we might provide specially designed instruction before a student is identified as a student with a disability. In addition, we are looking at our early learning standards, our curriculum, and making sure that we align it to the work that's being done in K-12 with the equity and access work that Tia has just been mentioning, making sure that our preschoolers are represented in the curriculum, that some of our students have physical disabilities, making sure that we address them as an inclusive view as well. Some of our students come to school and they have obvious differences. And so we talk about how we are all one community in our preschool, we're all one class, and very little words for little people and little learners about being friends and accepting everyone and playing together and singing together. And so we use those kind of terms with students at the young age, focused on inclusive practices. And then finally, just yesterday, our administrators at the preschool level went to the state support team to learn about the new licensing rules that were just updated over the summer. And we are processing the implications for our programming with those changes that have been put in place in July of this year. So that will be a year-long study that we reflect on our current programming in our district, what changes we may need to implement this school year to meet compliance with those licensing rule updates, and making sure that we are just reflecting on our programming in general to be sure that the quality programming is something we are always developing for our 3 to 5 year olds.
Matt?
Okay, so at our K-5 level, we've got different opportunities for learning, both our teaching, or our teachers and our instructional coaches, and some new positions as well. So to kick off math and new practice, a teacher's guide is a book study that our instructional coaches, we have one in all 7 of our buildings. That team of 7 is leading a book study. It's optional. It's outside of the school day to our K-5 math teachers, and it's so exciting. 58 people signed up district-wide by the deadline. And I was talking to some coaches even just today, and additional people in their building have come and said, I missed the deadline, but I still want to participate. Can I come? So, I mean, at the very least, even if that doesn't happen between the coaches and those teachers, we've gotten the upper 60s number of our elementary math staff who voluntarily want this learning. So we're really excited about that. Something that's going to be coming new to teachers this year, that our math leadership teams, we have math leadership teams at kindergarten through 5th grade. There's a representative from every school. So our kindergarten team would have a kindergarten teacher from each of the schools represented on it, as well as one of the instructional coaches. We do that at every one of the K-5 levels. And so some of the work that's going to happen this year with that group is a brand new resource that came out. I've been waiting and so excited. It just got released. It's called Math by the Book. And it's by a tremendous author named Sue O'Connell. And she and her team have written a book at all of the K-5 grade levels with how to integrate rich texts into our math classroom. And then there are 20 different rich picture books that then they have written lessons that can then align with that grade level standards. And so just the power of, talking about giving kids just a different context to access their curriculum, seeing themselves in text, identifying with the story and the theme, and then being able to pull the math out of that story as well. So we're really excited. I'm really excited to start that with teams. Anybody I've talked to about me, an elementary teacher, that's the love, right? The integration piece there. So that'll be exciting work. Next, we have Bridges Intervention. That's new this year, and actually the last 2 days I've been working with math alternative instructors that are repositioned this year to help our youngest mathematicians. We know these last couple years have definitely been challenging academically for some of our kiddos. And so the tool that we're using with that is called Bridges Intervention. And so those math AIs are part of that learning, as well as our instructional coaches side by side, because the tool is something that they can use to support our classroom teachers with as well. It's alternative activities, lessons, all written within a progression. So you know definitely what your standards are, but what happens when they can't access that just yet? What steps back do we need to take, and what are some different activities that we could be doing to support that build up? So that has been going on, that learning to understand how to use that tool is happening right now. Additionally, we are going to be piloting at the elementary school later this school year. Fluency is always a topic that comes up, and how do we help our kids become more flexible thinkers, reaching to that point of automaticity. And so we are going to pilot, again, having a primary and an intermediate representation from all 7 of our buildings, using this tool, and we'll see where that lands. Do we find that this is getting at the crux of the kinds of things that we want for our kids? Do we see movement when we use this tool, and really analyzing it as just a small team that way? So with that then is the learning for teachers about, there's what fluency is. Sometimes we have a lot of misconceptions around what fluency is as well. So being able to have more professional learning with that small pilot group, with potentially a larger group moving forward. And then finally, I talked about, I referenced learning for coaches as well. We are going to be in part 2. Last year we started it. There's a text called Everything You Need for Mathematics Coaching. A great book that's out right now, and a lot of communities are talking about it, school communities. But again, it's just giving coaches a lot of tools around a lot of essential topics that we want to support our teachers with. But it gives them, historically, that team, we try to feed into them as much as we can, because they're boots on the ground with our teachers, of course, and they feed into our teachers. But this book study is a unique opportunity that we can say, okay, it's not just about math and understanding math better, but it's really refining your role as a math coach. And so to have that marriage there between the coach piece and the math, it's been a really great tool, and led to some fantastic conversation and things that they can go right back and use with teachers. So last year we read certain chapters based off of their feedback and their survey results and topics of preference, and then this year we will finish that. Okay, so 6 through 8. We're really excited. So all of our 6th and 7th grade math teachers, as well as the intervention specialists, will be a part of a professional development this year through a team called the Teaching and Learning Collaborative. We've used them several times for other professional development as well. This is going to be 3 different days across the year. And it's several fold, but it teaches teachers how to use your math progressions, how to build up to students who might not be where we need them or we want them to be at the current moment. But how do we do that? How do we go from that concrete piece to pictorial to abstract? Even for our oldest students, they still need that concrete piece when they're learning. So just a lot of different embedded learning within that professional piece. For our Math 8 teachers, we'll be refining our curriculum maps this year. We have been doing that. We had a schedule over about the last 3 years, but again, I'm doing Tia's COVID year math. So we had about a 3-year plan and had to press pause a little bit for our Math 8 folks, but this year we're back. So this is the last team to refine their curriculum maps, and what's such a great part about that, again, we have representation from all of our schools at the table. And what's really nice is we get to embed resources for them, different instructional moves throughout the days together. So we always want to just not just map, but also build them up as teachers with just different ideas. You know, if what we have originally, we're finding that wasn't working for kids, okay, so let's look into some alternatives and teaching them about those resources. This year, we are also looking at fraction progressions. We have noticed historically that when a lot of our middle schoolers get referred for, you know, perhaps some special programming or some referrals for help, when they're assessed, it seems the breakdown comes in fractions. And so I have to give a huge shout out to Nikki Kelly and Heidi Sullivan, our two math instructional coaches at the middle school. They have been working, we've been working for months actually, and finally are launching a screener we put together based on different resources, and they'll be giving that to all 6th graders this year. They piloted it last spring. And so that way we can really refine where certain breakdowns and understanding as misconceptions happen, and then coaching teachers over time through their content meetings and their PLC work, how to fill, you know, those, or how to clear up those misunderstandings, or what are different activities they can be doing in small groups in their double block math time. Model curriculum and instructional supports, that's part of our state released items. Teacher teams statewide have come up with, again, a lot of just different resources and ideas to meet our state standards, alternative ideas. And so a lot of our teachers at the middle school have gone through that learning. And so this is the year that we're gonna make sure that everybody who hasn't already had the learning gets that. We had a slew of teachers. Well, we had, gosh, probably 7 or 8 new to CPM teachers this year who participated in our summer offerings. So that's always exciting. Also Bridges intervention at the middle school. I already talked about that. And also our middle school coaches are involved in that math coach study as well. So they also have that same learning.
And then at the high school level, the pull-out time will be focused for algebra and geometry. So algebra, we began this work in 2019, 2020. And so we got the blueprinting and the mapping. We were working on some more instructional supports around CPM. So we're going to continue that work this year. And then also meeting with the PLC to help align their philosophies. We have I believe 4 new teachers on that PLC team. And so we're going to meet to, you know, make sure that we're all on the same page and then help to plan that PD a little more effectively based on the needs of PLC group. But it'll all be around the CPM instructional supports, providing refinement, recalibration around that as well. And then within geometry, this will be the first year that we've had the full team of geometry together. So we're going to start by curriculum blueprinting and mapping. And then also at probably the last 2 days, focus on more instructional supports, including Desmos activities and some online platforms that might be useful to teachers. Again, meeting with them and sort of planning that as needed based on the needs of the teachers within that PLC.
Science.
Okay, K-5 science. So I talked about the math book study. That's going to be in semester 1. And then also an optional book study to our K-5 science teachers. It's called Eureka. There's a Eureka 3.5 and a Eureka K2. And it's very much of the same lines of that math by the book I was talking about. So it takes different content from those standards in that grade level band, and it supports with different picture books and different literature integration. And in addition to the literature integration piece, it also embeds, you know, literature skills, literary skills. So being able to find themes, that kind of thing. So that will be an optional book study after school, 2nd semester. And then 6 through 8 at our middle schools, each of our teams this year, we're going to have 3 different days in the first semester. They have been just dying to get together district-wide. And not just as a full science team, 6-8, but just the ones who teach what they teach. And so again, we had to pause last year, that was the plan, and so we're back this year. And So those teachers, district-wide, all our sixth grade science teachers will be at the table, same with seven, same with eight. And so we've really been talking about different ways, and we'll be utilizing these other things mentioned here, like these Paige Keeley probes. Fantastic resource. We purchased different books at different science domains last year, and this year we can really unpack those and take a look at those. But it kicks off lessons with making kids make a claim or take a side of here's what different students' opinions of something. Okay, who do you agree with and why? And as the learning then refines over the unit, they go right back to that probe again. Okay, now who do you agree with and why? Is it the same as before? What made you change your mind based on new learning, labs we've done, et cetera? And then the cognitive demands, those are basically just layman's terms, their levels of rigor, so to speak, deemed by our state, and a lot of different ways that we can get at that. And so when we meet as grade level teams this year, embedding, how can we get at that where students are citing evidence from the work that they've been doing in science to make their claims? How can we get at these different levels of rigor as we develop these units together and math as teams?
And then at the high school level, we'll be working with physical science and biology. Both of these PLC groups are very strong. PLC has one new member, but they've already done some blueprinting and mapping. So we're going to revise and refine that, and then continue working with their common assessment practices. And then biology, we went through the blueprinting and mapping, so they finalized that. Their units of study are all aligned. They've begun the work with common assessments and common scoring rubrics, and so we're going to finish that. So that's science.
ELA.
Yeah, thank you. In the area of language arts, I grouped kindergarten through eighth grade just because overall, we're really taking some time to focus on writing. It's been a lot of important work has been dedicated to writing over the years in Gahanna. And the last year with teaching through the screen or teaching from a distance when in the classroom, writing was really, really tricky to teach. So based on that feedback from teachers in practice with writing, this is an overall focus at the elementary and middle school level. The first bullet point up there, making workshops work, really focusing on co-teaching to support equity and access for all writers is a multi-year, it's really the outcome of a multi-year planning process between general education and special education. And it's a really good example of how we take what we learn from Teachers College Reading and Writing Project, for example, from that level of the learning organization that helps write our units of study, and how we bring the learning back and process it and make it our own. And that's what happened with this. We had Sue Wigging and Corinne Fields attend a training in New York about this work, supporting special education students within our workshops. And then last spring, we were able to have our two special ed coaches and then two of our building coaches, our general ed instructional coaches, attend online a similar institute that really looks at the intersection of our writing workshops as well as universal design for learning, which Tia mentioned earlier. So we're pulling that work together and studying it as a coaching group, as a leadership team. And we have two sites. One is at Middle School West and one is at Goshen Lane, a third grade and a seventh grade class, where we're going to study co-teaching and bring other coaches and teachers to learn over time of how to really maximize that relationship between the general ed teacher and the special ed teacher to support all writers. The continuing focus on writing workshop and our units of study is really rebooting, refining, getting back to that work that helps students find their voice, their nonverbal voice on paper through writing, whether that's coming up with ideas within the writing process, or more things that are about skills for making my writing clear, like we learned through foundations and our work with grammar and spelling. So we'll be focusing on those areas through our coaching meetings and ongoing training for our coaches, as well as our kindergarten through fifth grade literacy leadership teams. We have some specific focus areas depending on what the needs are at the different grade levels to really support that work. To help teachers be responsive to writers and bend the curriculum, which means looking at the plans we have in our curricular tools and connecting them to the needs of our specific writers. That's it. That was K-8.
And at the high school level, so English 9 and 10, as we've discussed in previous meetings, they began 3 years ago with Teachers College Reading Writing Workshop. At the high school level, there isn't as much, there aren't as many resources available. It's just now becoming something that is being explored more by that group. And so our English 9 and 10 team worked with the middle school coaches and developed a program or a path that was appropriate for high school level. The K through 8 level, they have units of study, and so it's more designed. Whereas at the high school level, they don't have units of study. There, I think now is one that just came out. But so the work we did the previous 2 years was looking at the workshop structure and how it can be adapted for high school learning, and first exploring it to see if it really was, guaranteed and viable within our curriculum. And so the work that they've done the past 2 years is to understand it and adapt it so that it fits the needs within the classroom. So after last year, we're going to do a little bit of refinement and realignment to make sure that the non-negotiables are still the non-negotiables for everybody within the group. And then we're going to continue working on curriculum mapping that got interrupted in 2020 as well. But this time we're going to pull in grades 9 and 10 because the English standards at the 9-10 level and 11-12 are grade banded. And so when we started working with English 9, we realized that it was best to pull in English 10 as well. So those two groups are going to be working together. And then English 11 and 12, again, without the structure of the workshop by the Teachers College, we're going to be partnering with colleges and having conversations with department chairs at different colleges to ensure what we're doing at the high school level aligns with what's in place at the college level. Through our dual credit or CCP classes, we have some teachers who are teaching the Composition 1 classes here at the high school and Composition 2 as well. So through the work with Columbus State, we've realized that there are changes that are taking place at the college level. And so we want to make sure that we're changing to meet the needs of students as they take that next step. So we're going to explore, have conversations with the colleges, and then develop a workshop seminar structure within the classroom to make sure that the lesson structure is appropriate for that grade level. And we'll probably end with blueprinting, but not mapping, just to make sure that we have a good plan in place before we jump into the standards and aligning it with the units.
Yes, a question regarding K-8. You talked about supporting equity and access for all writers, and you mentioned special needs. And I was wondering what other areas, it was brought up with kids who are having trouble at home or come from economically disadvantaged situations, but what other instances is that equity and access in terms of workshops and co-teaching? What other instances does that apply to? That was part one of my question, and also was wondering if you could explain a little bit more about bending the curriculum and what that means.
Sure. So universal design looks at different ways to engage students, kind of the why of their learning. Why am I writing this? Why am I learning how to spell? The whole gamut of skills and purposes for writing. So that's one piece of that equity and access lens that we're applying to writing, the universal design piece. And then different ways of representation refers to, not everybody's essay has to look the same. There are definitely structures that we want kids to come away with understanding, but depending on needs, an essay could be a speech that you give, or it could be a review that you write about a book, etc. And then what action are kids taking, like the how of learning? How do we set up our workshops? We have full group, we have small group, we have one-on-one conferring. So that's what I meant with about equity and access. Are we making sure that we're giving kids a range of experiences in workshops settings? The different groups in terms of who we're providing access to. So we said students who have IEPs, students who are coming into the classrooms speaking multiple languages, and maybe English isn't their first one. So making sure that we're able to help them have a voice in their writing and learn more about how English works so that they can write, feel empowered to write and be empowered to write in English.
Can I just add to
Yeah.
that too? This learning specifically is centered around our co-teaching partnerships. So in those settings where we have a general education teacher and a special education teacher in the room together, or a general education teacher and a BL specialist in the room together, how do we strengthen those partnerships so that we're making sure we're meeting the needs of all the kids in that classroom? So that's what this part is focused on.
Thank you, Tia.
Yep, no
Yeah,
problem.
the co-teaching part is one I overlooked. And then,
go ahead.
yeah, and then bending the curriculum, that's a term we use to mean that teachers aren't just following a script with any of our resources. We do have some very supportive coaching language. We've mentioned that Teachers College Reading and Writing Project is the learning organization behind our reading and writing units of study. And they provide, because they are about professional development, they provide a lot of, this is how we've taught this. This is how you could teach it in your room. But we're at a point in our curriculum where we're ready to make sure we're being responsive with it and really looking at the students in front of us. And, you know, how do I deliver a mini lesson or meet with a small group of writers in a way that they need versus what's just written in the curriculum. So bending, oh, I wanted to say one more thing. Bending also, sorry, you get me talking about writing. Bending also shows that like there's still that structure in place. We've been very committed for a long time to the workshop structure, which is really an apprenticeship model where kids are learning from the expert in the room, which could be their teacher, it could be a partner, etc. Mentor text, you know, published books that are bringing the expertise of writers into the room, but there's still that hallmark of this is a writing workshop. So it's not completely throwing out the window the curriculum, our board adopted curriculum, it's bending it to encircle our learners and make sure their needs are being met. So that was a very intentional selection of that word bending.
Sorry, I'm back here, so no one can see. I guess I'm looking for clarity on that. So I have 4 children in the district and 3 of them are on IEPs. And yes, they have accommodations, and some of them specifically for writing. And I appreciate those accommodations, but their expectations are still the same that they're in the classroom. So the equity piece for me, like my daughter who's in 8th grade, she's still expected to produce work like her peers. So how does that equity piece look? You were saying students with IEP, so how does that equity piece play into that? Because, I mean, I've taught my children that life isn't fair and she struggles and she works her tail off to get where she is, but she's still, even with her learning disability, she's still expected to do X, Y, and Z to pass. She's not just going to pass because she has an IEP and life is hard.
Well, I can speak to the fact that students with disabilities have different access points. And sometimes what we do is we meet them where they are and provide the interventions at their intensity level so they can perform similar to their peers if that's the expectation. But we also have some students that have modified curriculum that we know we need to provide them the individualized learning standards that are meeting their needs. So we have a range of learners and many of our students do have the same expectation, but the way we teach them is what's different. The specific interventions that our specialists are trained in to meet the learning gaps, the learning style of that learner is what's different. And we make sure that we can reach all those learners. And then sometimes we do have students that have different expectations, but those are specific to students and they're outlined in what you just described, their IEP, whether it's accommodated or modified, and those are 2 different things.
Right, so I guess my question with the equity piece, really the equity is only for those students with those accommodations. It's not for every child in the classroom.
There
It's
are
only
universal accommodations that all students have available to them, regardless of ability or disability. including our gifted population or our students with English language differences, including students that come to us with different backgrounds of instruction. So sometimes in our curriculum, there is vocabulary or jargon they've not been introduced to. And so we don't want that to be a barrier. So then we would teach them in a different way than maybe someone who's had the same curriculum in Indiana for a number of years. So always looking to see where a student comes to the classroom and making sure we meet them where they are to get them, exactly to what you say, to the ending point or the expectation for the curriculum.
Okay, so.
And I would just
that
add-
is- So then if a teacher is grading, let's say essays, I feel like that could be a very, well, I know this child can do this, and so I'm a little bit more, lenient, and that's good for them, so I'll give them an A. Whereas I know this child can do this, and even though it may have been better than child A, it wasn't as good for them. So, you see what I'm saying? Like, I just feel like it's not a very clear cut. This is what you get if you do this. This is what you get if you do this. And I just feel like I don't know how much we're setting our children up for real world scenarios if we're always, and I mean, again, I have 3 children with disabilities, so I have the biggest mama heart for my children with disabilities. I mean, all 4 of my children I love. But,
Thank you for clarifying that.
but I mean, my one without accommodations, she says all the time, it's not fair. I don't get the extended time. I don't get the small classroom. I don't get the one-on-one.
And we talk
And I'm
about
saying,
that.
well, guess what?
Yeah.
God-
There
this
is
the way
equal,
God made you,
right?
this is the way
Yeah.
He made them. So life
Yep.
isn't fair.
Yep.
You have to deal with the hand you're dealt. And so that's what some.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Fair is not always equal.
Yeah.
And individual students should get what they individually need. And it's not the same for 20 students in a classroom. It is sometimes different for each student based on how they come to the classroom with their previous skills, with the gaps they might have, with the advanced learning they might have. And so it does look different for everybody. You're right. It's sometimes viewed as not fair.
I will say though, to add, and because a couple of things, like you don't have to, our students don't have to have a label for us to talk about equitable access for them. And so another way I think to help to explain it a little bit better is, again, the expectations are the same for students. We want them to learn and to master these skills. But the way a student might demonstrate that learning might vary based on what is most appropriate for that student. And also, how do we engage them in that learning so that they can learn? But the expectation for the learning is the same. And that is what we're working on. Except again, for those instances where if a student is on a modified curriculum, that's a different situation. But in our general education settings, in a class that's co-taught or not co-taught, we have set expectations for learning, and we want to do all that we can to ensure that every kid can meet those expectations. How they meet it is where there's some variation, because we might have, say, a student who, and now there's also going to be some very specific skills, as Erin has mentioned before, that we are working towards. So again, if we're talking about the skill of writing an essay, we have to focus on, and that's going to be the assessment point that we're looking at. Where do you rank in the skill of writing an essay? But if we're talking about how are you able to convey, a summary of a story, or how are you able to, process the research that you have done, you might have some options in there. And so we talk about the student sense of belonging and having some choice and how they demonstrate their learning. So we might have a student that wants to write an essay to demonstrate their learning. We might have a student that wants to give a speech or a presentation. We have students that enjoy doing recording videos and presenting that. And all of those are ways for them to demonstrate their learning. That is giving them an even playing field to say, like, I know you've learned it, but for you to put it on paper might still be a struggle. I know I need to work with you on putting it on paper, but right now my goal, the learning target, was this information, and you were able to show me that you learned that.
Right, and I get that, and I'll also say, I plan on coming to meetings. I know I've shared before that I have 4 children. My background is also in special ed, and I taught not in Indiana, but in Ohio and Atlanta. So none of this is new to me. I guess to say it again, though, I feel like I'm not disagreeing with certain children have certain strengths and certain children have weaknesses. I just feel like sometimes we're doing them a disservice and not setting them up for after they leave JPS. I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you.
At the elementary level, this year, we've had a fourth grade social studies leadership team for a while. It's been a little dormant for the last couple of years because when fourth grade was a tested grade level for social studies, we spent a lot of time really mapping things out, blueprinting, and we had that really set with fourth grade, and there's a lot of power in that. So I want to work on establishing a social studies leadership team this year that has a primary and an intermediate representative from each school. So currently at our math and literacy leadership teams, we have a person from every grade level from every school. But this one would be, like I said, representation from the K2 and through 5 band to really give us an opportunity to look vertically at how the progressions work in social studies, and to have some time to really just study the standards, review content elaborations in our model curriculum and the expectations for learning. Last year was the first year of full implementation of our new standards that were adopted in 18 and 19. And that wasn't the best time to be digging into social studies standards. So we were very busy with a lot of other things last year. So I look at this team as getting started around mid-year and doing some direction setting work very similar to what's been done recently in science. In 6-8, these two bullet points under 6th grade and 7th grade, or under 6th through 8th grade, really go hand in hand. Again, we have the updated standards that currently our maps are collections of standards organized by organized by quarter, and there's a lot more that we can dig into. And when I say in here through the lens of equity and access, it really takes us down to that next bullet point where in 2019 and 20, we had a cohort of social studies teachers that were really digging into methodology within a workshop that helps them help kids use skills that they learn in language arts to really dig into their social studies curriculum as well as demonstrate their understanding of it. So we will be revisiting and expanding the cohort throughout the year, pulling back into some of the methods that they dug into, as well as including all of our teachers in it, not just a representative group. And we've been partnering with a social studies teacher in New York who has written one of our favorite units of study about research skills. And he, came in 2019, and where actually one of our middle school literacy coaches, Kevin Mishler, has really maintained a close contact with him to help us continue that relationship and learning from him.
What is this person's name?
His name is Mark Todd.
Mark Todd of New York. You guys like New York, don't you?
Well, Teachers College is in New York, so yeah, we do like New York.
So are a lot of other things. Okay, Mark Todd,
Mark Todd, M-A-R-C.
MRC. Thank you.
And at the high school level, just like in many of the other disciplines, we're gonna, with modern world history, we're gonna wrap up curriculum blueprinting and mapping. And then we're going to spend the day working on finalizing common assessments and scoring rubrics with that PLC group as well.
Again, I was wondering how, here's the lens of equity and access. If it explains, what does that mean?
For our middle school social studies.
Right, yes.
So specifically looking at how are we supporting kids as readers and writers, speakers and listeners to unpack to understand the content. So, using small groups, using the workshop structure that we use in language arts to give kids an opportunity to make some choices about how they're taking notes, the sorts of things they're synthesizing, having their teachers meet with them one-on-one rather than full class lecture as the only methodology, but it's more responsive and back and forth between the teacher and students.
So when you're saying equity, it's more about just like flexible learning styles or?
Yeah.
Understanding their kids' needs and meeting them.
But yeah, how can those be equitable if they're different.
That's what it is.
Because not everybody needs the same thing, so some people do need it to be different from someone else.
I guess again, like what the other lady was saying there is that in the real world, you need to learn all these different skill sets. So you can't just be flexible. And one week, you just choose, or if this is your strength, you get to do this one. Like, I mean, I kind of expect my kids to learn all of these different methods and, be challenged to do all these different methods and not just be like kind of pushed into whatever they feel comfortable with. I mean, how do you bring excellence and, learning?
Well, like the example Tia gave on how students might show mastery of content, all of the students would be exposed to essay writing, presentation, the various options, but then there's a voice and choice component that then allows them to distribute or to demonstrate in the way that's best for them, how they master the
So this would
content.
just be a small portion of what they're learning that's flexible, but in general, they're all having to
meet the same standards,
Right.
the access,
This-
to the same content.
Yes. The other piece is the depth of understanding, really, that circles back up to our unpacking of the standards. Not all standards can be assessed or understood by a multiple choice sort of experience in the classroom. And so making sure that all of our kids in every one of our social studies classrooms have access to a teacher who is unpacking the work to the depth of knowledge required by the model curriculum from the state. The point you made about kids just really latching on to a strategy that they're comfortable with really circles back around also to the co-teaching model, because that is one of the things that we want to be very mindful of, kids not just being overly scaffolded or overly supported and becoming very dependent on a teacher for, helping me make my choices or helping me complete this assignment. So that co-teaching learning that we want to do really is designed to support kids with just the right amounts of support, but to start pulling it back when they show independence with the skills we're teaching.
I even noticed too, just as an observation, and this is anecdotal, so, for what it's worth, throw something at me if it's wrong. But I noticed in the learning, even in my own house, the different methods, like you can do a flip grid, you can write a paper, like do a speech, but a lot of teachers will then say, you can't repeat the same one more than twice, right? So you have to learn how to do those different things, but maybe you get the opportunity to first try the one that you're most comfortable with, like make a video, right? Of the content that you learned in order to be measured, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the same measurement that's repeated all the time. And I've seen that continuously throughout the instruction in the middle school and the high school in particular. Yes, ma'am.
I just think the word equity is tripping everyone up.
Yeah.
And it's causing angry people to be showing up to these meetings and derailing you. It's not equity. You are maximizing the potential of each individual child by being able to format their learning according to their needs. Maximizing potential. Is there any way to change the name of this? And you're going to make every meeting a lot more productive.
So are we hung up on semantics or on what we're actually, the work we're doing?
Semantics.
So could
The
we
word
shift to
equity.
being hung up on the work that's happening and not the word that's being used?
People are being hung up on the word equity and not actually listening to what you're doing.
Then I would challenge that movement.
What movement?
To focus on the work that's being done.
I'm saying right here today, you've got the word equity being thrown around 50 times in access, and people are hearing, and there's a connotation to the word equity, as you all know, that's very top of mind for people and triggery. But what you're doing is not.
And that's,
it's good. It's
yes.
like he even needs the kids
That is the
where
piece
they
that we
are.
want to see, because
So I'm
it's
just
meeting
saying-
kids where they are.
I'm just saying.
That's what equity
There's
is.
been people not understanding. You're explaining what you're doing.
Yeah.
But the word equity, what you're calling it, is not aligning everyone to understanding what it is that you're actually doing.
It's
So I'm
almost
just-
like we need to norm, like, what do we mean when we say?
Well,
what
it
do-
goes
what-
back.
what
That
do
was
you
a
hear
question
when you
that
hear
we
it?
had.
That's why I asked it.
Yeah.
Maximizing the
What does that
potential.
word mean to the
Absolutely.
room? Does that matter?
For every student, every single student, so no isolation, every single student that walks through our halls.
But not everything is equal. It's fair based on where they are.
Yes.
Which to your point, that's all I'm saying. I'm not like debating or anything. I'm just saying to help you move on, move along. I'm just the word equity is tripping people up.
A lot of people associate the word equity with equal equal outcome.
Yeah.
And that's where we're, you know, a lot of people believe in equality. Everybody has equal opportunity. But when we hear that equal outcome, it makes us feel like, well, our kids are not gonna be held, kids are gonna be held to standards, or standards are maybe lowered because, you know, somebody else is disadvantaged or whatever. So, I mean, even like she was saying, I mean, what you're talking about, it makes sense, but I wouldn't use the word equity to describe it. So I wouldn't even just call it semantics. It's more like, is that describing what you're doing? Because like she said, I feel like it is.
Yeah, so I'm getting hung up on the people that are being chosen to, whose theologies or whatever being chosen to be followed. My mouth doesn't work sometimes. I do plan to read this Cornelius Minor book, but now I'm hung up on this Mark Todd because right here it says that his curriculum is based on the theater of the oppressed. When I look up what the theater of the oppressed is, it tells me that, I mean, and I don't know, this is the internet, so who knows, but it tells me that as a means of promoting social and political change alignment originally with the radical left politics and later with the center left ideology. So I just don't think that's right.
So I was in Mark Todd's classroom in New York City. I didn't see any of that. So what I saw was a very gifted teacher giving kids assignments to do, collaborating with them. The essays they wrote were magnificent. And, you know, if you Google Steve Barrett, there's hundreds of them. So I will look at that. I mean, I used to go to my college library and they tried to charge me a fine for another Steve Barrett. So I don't know if that's the Mark Todd, but if you send that to me, I'll take a look at it.
You will? You'll
Yeah, I
take
will.
a look at it?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll send you what I was reading then.
And then a
Yeah,
few other
that's why I
additional
said
opportunities of professional learning at the high school. You know, as we all know, the past couple of years have been pretty disruptive for students and staff. So one of our focuses within our administrative team, building leadership team, and staff is to focus on our sense of belonging. So we're creating sessions that focus on culture, mindset, relationships and trust, high-performing teams, and transformational leadership to ensure that we are addressing the concerns and the needs of everyone involved within the building. So that's something that we're working to develop as an administrative team at the high school. And then also within the new high school planning, in conjunction with DLR, the architect group, we're going through the BOLD process, and the BOLD stands for Bridging Organizational Learning Design. It's sort of two-pronged. We're starting with the physical space or the footprint. And the first couple of days back in one of the PD sessions, we walked through a DNA protocol, we called it. As we're creating the building, we want to make sure that our DNA is indicative of what our space looks like. And this was actually adapted from a classroom inventory that a teacher put out to get to know her students in the classroom. So the D stands for dream. So, you know, if you're designing your classroom space, what dreams do you have? The N stand for needs. And then the A is just any amazing ideas that you have through experiences, what you see. And prior to this, DLR held a 1-hour informational sort of session to give some ideas of what considerations they're looking at. So we ran through that with all the content areas. And then the second part of that is the instructional space design. And that's what we're going to be working with BOLD to create throughout the year, both within PLC meetings, department time, staff time. And then lastly, the instructional technology opportunities. Our library media specialist and some of our technology staff are going to be running some of these learning opportunities. So young adult literature workshop, Apple teacher workshop, and Google Classroom training. And these opportunities are voluntary for teachers who are interested.
All right, in addition to our core curriculum training that all of our special education teachers have the opportunity to attend, we also focus on some specially designed instruction professional development for our intervention specialists. This year, we are not doing any new initiatives. We are focusing on sustainability. We're focusing on revisiting the tools that are in our in our district because we find that they are the effective tools. And so just helping our teachers that are new to learn those interventions, and then making sure that our teachers that have been practicing these interventions continue to refine their intervention skills. We front-loaded last school year, the 1920 school year, the multisensory approach to teaching math, which focuses on the foundational skills of teaching math and filling gaps in students' learning specific to their disability in the area of math. This year, we had intervention specialists and other teachers also participate anywhere from 18 to 30 hours this summer in training with our multisensory math trainer. And then this school year, we'll have 3 additional coaching opportunities from her. And our coaches are practicing with teachers in the classroom and how to apply the hands-on math interventions that they learned this summer, last school year, and will be continuing to learn throughout this school year. We continue to provide Orton Gillingham training for our teachers that teach English language arts, which is also a multisensory explicit language-based approach to teaching reading and writing. And so some students need that explicit instruction that is very prescriptive. And so we have that both in math and in reading, writing, and spelling through multisensory math and through Orton Gillingham. And we are an accredited site through Marison Academy. We have a trainer that is in-house that trains our teachers both in the summer and through a year-long training program, and does 60 hours of hands-on application of that training throughout the school year. And then each year does 10 hours of additional refinement for recertification for those teachers that go through the initial training. And then finally, we are continuing to refine and reboot our current writing interventions that have been implemented over the last 2 school years. And so I just listed those as well. And those are just different explicit ways to teach small parts of writing when students don't respond to our core curriculum and they need something more specialized or individualized for them. So you'll see we have grammar interventions there. We have techniques to provide them with feedback about their writing and areas that they need to refine within the writing process, whether it's planning, communicating, drafting, or editing. Sometimes it's at the sentence level, sometimes it's at the paragraph level, sometimes it's at the essay level, depending on what the student needs. And then we're also focusing on making sure that students can edit repeatedly and make their writing more powerful as they develop between kindergarten through high school. So we're just refining those interventions, and our 2 intervention coaches are helping teachers in the classroom as they're practicing for individual student level or small group levels. Just as a real quick addition, we also continue to do things that we need to do to meet our students' needs, such as training our new teachers on how to implement special education, IEP writing, compliance writing. All those things are ongoing and happen every year.
So gifted is a little bit different from everything else in that it is mandated by the Ohio Department of Education through the change in operating standards of 2018. So starting that year, teachers who teach clusters of gifted students, not our gifted intervention specialists, are required to have 60 hours of professional development over 4 years. So a minimum of 15 hours each year. And they are in 8 different competencies. So they even tell us what it is that we have to do. And for those teachers, we have 2 whole day meetings. In the beginning, we talk about what those competencies are, what are the characteristics of gifted kids, what are their needs, how does that differ from the regular ed population, and then how to differentiate curriculum. And then we drill down to differentiating in math and in reading. If they have 60 hours, we're required to do continual professional development, and this district has set that limit. And so it's 1 hour last year and 1 hour this year, continued professional development that teachers can get either through working with gifted intervention specialists, gifted specialists, or online Google Classroom specifically for gifted, or GT Ignite. In grades 9 through 12, our AP teachers are required to have 30 hours over 4 years, but only if they have 24 hours of AP training. If they don't have that 24 hours of AP training, they're required to have 60 hours, just like our gen ed teachers. So that's 7.5 hours per year. And then if they have the 30 hours, again, 1 hour additional last year and this year.
And so then I'll talk a little bit about some of our special programs and staff. And so I work with our EL team, which supports our English learners. Our population is growing. We're at 412 and counting currently, students that have limited English proficiency coming from different countries and speaking over 30 languages. And so our EL team are the staff that we have on board to support those teachers. And so they benefit from the content specific PD that was mentioned a little bit earlier. But then also we have specific PD and meetings to focus on their area of supporting English learners in the classroom. And so one of the things that they typically would be able to do is to go to the Ohio TESOL conference every year, which in TESOL stands for Teaching English to Students of Other Languages. But TESOL this year has been canceled, and what they're doing in place of it is, and it was canceled early on, it was canceled in spring. What they decided to do in replacement of that is they're going to do a webinar series throughout the year that still helps people engage with learning. And so that is an opportunity because, again, it is specifically targeted around understanding and supporting English learners. And in the standards, there are academic standards for English learners. They also, and I believe we've talked about this before in connection with our report card, but our EL students every year have to take the Ohio English Language Proficiency Assessment in order to determine and to measure their progress towards English proficiency. And so the standards are centered around supporting students to meet that proficiency status. And so TESOL and the PD that they're able to engage in there helps them to better support kids in the gen ed classrooms. They also, I have 3 days, full days, where I pulled a full K-12 team. You have 14 total EL teachers this year now. And that's really, our team is growing. But we have 3 days where we pull the full team, 1 in the fall, 1 in the winter, and 1 in the spring. And that's where we're able to, again, just review our structures, our practices, synthesize our learning, and talk about how can we continue to improve our program to meet the needs of our kids. And then they have some, within that, they have some leveled meetings too. So our elementary team can meet together, middle school team, and then high school team, and then we're able to meet collectively. And then there's also times built throughout the year where elementary meets also monthly as their PLC. Once a month, and then middle school and high school do the same within the buildings. So again, they have opportunities to talk as a collective, so we could talk programming K-12, and then also they have opportunities to talk specific to the students that they serve at their particular level. And so a lot of that is where it's embedded work that happens and it's ongoing. As was mentioned, again, we have had intentional focus on writing across the board for all students, and then also some writing support specifically for our students, our EL students, and how to help them better be supported in the writing workshop within the classroom. So there has been some intentional release time, and now this year it'll be just more embedded support, continuing to support the EL team with kids in their classrooms so that they can engage in the writing curriculum that we have in place. And then through all of it, we're constantly talking about what are those best practices. We're constantly kind of doing that research together as a team, and then talking about how can we implement that for the growth of the EL team, but then also how do they then share that information with the teachers that they work with who also serve our students. So they facilitate learning sessions during PD days. Sometimes they'll do it within a staff meeting within their PLC. So constantly trying to feed into them so that they can then share that out with the teachers that serve their kids. From a related arts standpoint, I'm going to jump and then I'll pass it to you. Sure. Even though my bullet, is down below. So art, music, PE, and health pretty much follow the same structure. They all of those groups have 2 full days where we're able to pull the full K-12 team, because as you can imagine, and with what we heard, sometimes it doesn't always feel like the professional learning is geared towards like best practices across all classes. But when you want to talk about developing people in their area, we also want to be able to focus specifically on the art standards and what does art instruction look like, and the music standards and what does that look like. And so that's what those 2 days are centered for. And what I like about that is we do have a related arts leadership team, which has representation from every level, from all of those groups. And so we work collaboratively to build those days for their department. And so the related arts team comes together, and the art teachers represented from elementary, middle, and high school come together and process a PD plan for the year that then we pull the art department, and they get to engage with learning that is definitely is very relevant and applicable to being an art educator, or being a PE teacher, a health teacher. So we have the related arts team that helps to, a leadership team that helps to plan that. And then they get 2 days where they get to focus specifically on their content area. And some of the things, the biggest things that we tend to focus on is, again, always refining and developing our programs and looking at that vertical alignment K-12. And then also with the addition, now we're looking at, what are some of those common performance rubrics? What are the expectations that we want to set for kids, and then how do we measure that, and that to be able to have some conversations about, okay, now let's take a look at the data that's given us, and then how do we adjust our structures and our class or our curriculum in order to ensure that our students are able to meet those expectations that we have set. So those are some of the things that they talk about in those days. And then when applicable, they also are able to participate in their state conferences. And right now, art is still a go. And right now, music is still a go. So fingers crossed they're able to attend those, because again, it isn't often that, they feel like there is a PD that is specific to art educators, PE educators, health educators. So we definitely try to help them with that. Oh, I'm sorry. Yep. Thank you. Library.
Speaking to the content-specific professional development opportunity for related arts. So same thing, that would be the Elma conference. This year they're having it, it's a 1 day. Usually it's a 2. They're having it 1 day on a Saturday this year. So many of our librarians are excited to attend that. But it's, it's the statewide conference. So they learn about the most relevant authors, the most relevant series, teaching practices, et cetera, ways to support your teachers, lots of different sessions within that. Meta training has been extremely beneficial to our newest members of our librarian team at the elementary. We're a full-time librarian, so we have 4 new this year. And so the Meta piece is our local piece. And so they've been learning all about their software and a lot of different drop downs to learn all of those kinds of things. So not just the content behind the text, but also the logistics of that as well. And then they also pull together through Meta local librarians to have those conversations as well for learning. Not noted here, but also we will be having some time this year to discuss just this past semester. So spring semester of last school year, the state released updated library guidelines. And so that encompasses a lot of different things. And so we want to make sure that our librarians have access to those updates, and that we're really taking a look at our curriculum, especially at elementary, where they deliver lessons, just like the other related arts, and so making sure that it's aligned.
All right, just a couple more here. So we have our world languages, and we started to do some really intentional work with world languages about 3 years ago. And again, they have the same where they have 2 full days to be able to come together and pull middle school and high school world languages, and it's done by the language. So Spanish will have a day, Chinese have a day, and so forth. And again, the goal is for them to be able to have conversations and dive into learning specific to teaching a world language, and more specifically to teaching the world language that they are teaching. There are world language standards that are general that we kind of map out all of our programming with, but then when we talk about how does that translate to a Spanish class, and then how does that translate to a German class and so forth, they have an opportunity to be able to dive into that learning and do some alignment, and also, to share information with each other, because like we know, like all of our middle school kids come to the high school, so having some opportunity for the middle school teachers to talk to the high school teachers to strengthen that program. And another component of that is also just that recruitment and retention. Like, we want students to explore different languages if that's what they choose to do, and we would like for them to continue to explore if that's where they decide. And so how can we strengthen the programming so that we can retain students as they're progressing through? Because many of our students start in the 8th grade, and we would love to see them make it to AP. And so that's a part of the goal. And then again, continuing with the assessment development and the data review. So a few years back, when they refined the standards for world languages, they also helped to give more guidance around different ways to assess students' proficiency within the target language. And specifically, they call them integrated performance assessments, or IPAs. And so our teams back then did create some IPAs, and they've been using them, but over time, we haven't really looked at refining, and let's see, like, how are our students performing, and how do we use that information to talk about like what adjustments need to be made or updates need to be made to our curriculum in those languages. And so having, again, that's an intentional focus on taking a look at what those performance assessments look like. What is the data we're getting about our kids, and then what does that mean? How does that impact what we do next within instruction? We're going to have intentional focus on that. And then lastly, we have within the career tech, and this is actually something I'm really excited about because it was birthed from the ground up from the teachers that are involved. But as I know many of you know, Mike Kunselman, who is our engineering teacher, has been in collaboration. He's in collaboration with a number of different teachers around across the district, but specifically with our architecture program teacher, Jason McGee, and then also recently pulled in a math teacher, Matt Parks, to talk about, again, just how do we strengthen and refine our engineering program. So I have it as engineering and architecture because what they started to process that, you know, there are some skills, especially that are explored in our intro to engineering class, that are valuable in, you know, math, or can be supported by math, but then also in the architecture program. So really strengthening that pathway to say, like, how can we establish that intro class and then give students some options that can help them to decide which route they want to go starting from the beginning. And so it really is a collaboration that has come out of that from those teachers. And so now we're just kind of giving them the space to really develop it. And I'm excited about that, especially as we think about programming for the new high school, because that will help also and shape what we move forward with it and different programs that we pull on from a career tech aspect. And so that is our PD.
And then finally,
We're just, so this one, because it was briefly mentioned at the beginning that we are offering graduate level courses. And so not all of the courses are, courses and opportunities for graduate credit. Not all of them are fleshed out, but we do have different opportunities that teachers will be able to engage in throughout the year where they can get graduate credit. And again, as I mentioned before, that's with a partnership that we have had with Ohio Dominican, that Sharon does a great job as our liaison with them, making sure that our teachers have that opportunity to continue their learning.
and not noted, but there's also, in the works, also different buildings choose to run something for credit so they can meet their building goals through studies as well.
Before we take questions from the board, I just want to close by saying clearly these are some very busy people. But I also want to say, as we started, you know, the COVID pandemic that we're dealing with has implications in the professional development world. So we're trying to be mindful of, even though there's a lot of learning going on, we're also trying to be mindful of teachers out of the classroom and faculty support in the embedded manner. So, you know, sub shortages are something we continue to think about. Obviously, at the special board meeting, you voted on the increase because of that need. So just as a whole, there's a lot planned, but we're going to be monitoring and responsive to, you know, the needs in our buildings and our classrooms.
So with that, we are running about 10 minutes behind time. I just want to open it up, make sure there's no other board members that haven't had a chance to ask questions or there's something we need to work on.
I have one question. So we passed the resolution last July, the anti-racism resolution. How is that impacting professional development?
I think it is just about ways that we can help support teachers to better understand and support the kids that they serve. And when I say that, I mean, like, all of the whole child and any, regardless of their identity, regardless of their classification. How can we help you to better understand that student so you could better serve them in the classroom? That is the impact on our instruction. And so as we have described within here, when we talk about equity, it is about making space so that every student in our class can access the learning and can be successful in those learning spaces, regardless of the needs that they have, that we understand those needs, that we're meeting those needs so that we can get them to that ultimate goal. Again, I think about, like I had mentioned before, we have, as of right now, because we're still screening some students, but we have 412 students that have limited English. We have to understand what they're bringing to the table and understand what their background is and how to be able to engage them so that we can get them to learn the curriculum and the expectations that we have in place. That's how we pull it into the professional development. But I will also be honest with you, there is still a lot of learning that we are doing in that area as well.
I want to clarify too, it was not an anti-racism resolution, it was a resolution to reaffirm the district's core values. And it was reflecting the work that was already going on in the district.
The resolution itself did state we are an anti-racist.
That's not the title of the resolution.
Right, but within the body of the.
That's just how you described it, so I was just responding to that.
It's in the text.
All that I'm clarifying is what the title of the resolution is.
That's fine.
Any other board members have any questions?
I don't have a question, but I just applaud you all. I know that you are, just like our students, we have 70-some new teachers and we have probably 300 plus that are 3 years or less, or 4 years or less. So, and then some that have been here a long time. And so you're trying to develop quality professional development for a wide spectrum of students in the teacher role. So I'm sure while balancing the state requirements and all of the other mandated kind of things. So I just applaud your work.
Anybody else on the board? So I just want to close by saying thank you again for the presentation. It was very thorough. We have an opportunity, I think, to talk about these things on a frequent basis about what's happening in our schools, with our teachers, with our students, and this is really a great forum for that. Thankful for the deliberate discussion that we had today. Thankful for the opportunity to be able to share our opinions, agree and disagree, and learn from one another. I also am just, I guess, one of the takeaways I have from this presentation is that, you know, at the end of the day, the involvement between the curriculum department, administration, teachers, and administrators is so robust, and I think not always understood in the community. And so, you know, talking about how teachers are serving on the leadership committees to create the curriculum, you know, for the professional development days, and having you know, leadership and representation as we plan this together from different buildings, different grade levels. I think it really does, in my opinion, show that integration, and that is very meaningful, I think, in creating a school community and that framework. So with that being said, thank you so much, everyone. It is 8:44 and we are officially adjourned.
Nice job, you guys. Great job tonight.